Have you
frequent
ever been
food
just seconds
gestures
away
like
from making the biggest decision of
fresh.
your life,
Okay.
only for a stranger
Nice.
to lean in and whisper something that could change your entire future? That's exactly what happened to billionaire tech CEO Ethan Carter on a crisp October morning in Chicago. And if I'm being honest, this is one of those moments that proves life can turn on a single sentence. The boardroom at Carter Innovations was buzzing like an overcharged power grid. Sleek glass walls reflected the morning sunlight, and the skyline beyond looked like a city carved out of ambition itself. Ethan Carter, at 39, sat at the head of the mahogany table in his tailored charcoal suit, pen poised above the final page of a contract worth billions, the Sterling Alliance merger. His crowning achievement, the deal that would take his company global overnight. Across the table, his lifelong business partner Lucas Vega sat with a grin that looked almost too perfect, flanked by Javier Torres, Sterling's chief negotiator. Both men were radiating confidence. "Once you sign, Ethan," Lucas said, tapping the table lightly, "we'll be in the history books. Market leaders. Untouchable." Ethan's pulse was steady. He was focused, prepared, or so he thought. The pen's tip hovered over the paper when the boardroom door opened with a quiet click. In walked Isabella Isa Ramirez, one of the cleaning staff. She wore the company's standard gray uniform, her dark hair pulled back neatly. She was pushing her cart, a small cardboard trash box balanced on top. "Sorry," Isa murmured, her voice respectful, almost timid. "Just need to empty the bin real quick." Nobody paid her much attention. Executives rarely do to cleaning staff, except Ethan, who gave a polite nod. He'd always believed in treating every employee with respect, whether they wore suits or janitor's gloves. Isa wheeled her cart around the table, stopping beside Ethan's chair. She bent down as if adjusting the trash bag, but instead of standing up immediately, she tilted her head toward him. Her voice was barely audible, just a breath against the noise of the room. "Don't sign. It's a trap." Ethan froze. The pen slipped from his fingers and landed with a dull clink on the table. He turned his head slowly, meeting Isa's eyes, calm, steady, and dead serious. "What?" he whispered back, almost inaudible. She straightened, face neutral, as though nothing had happened. Without another glance, she picked up the bin and resumed her route toward the door. Across the table, Lucas's voice cut through the tension. "Ethan? Everything okay?" His tone was light, but his eyes sharpened with curiosity. "Yeah," Javier added from the far side. "We've all been through the terms 100 times. Ready when you are." Ethan's gaze flicked to Lucas, then back toward the door where Isa had just disappeared. Something inside him, a mix of instinct and unease, was suddenly screaming for attention. "I need 5 minutes," he said abruptly, standing so fast his chair scraped against the floor. Lucas blinked. "5 minutes? Ethan, we're all here. The market's primed." "I said 5. His voice was calm but carried a weight that cut off further protests. Without waiting, Ethan stepped out into the hallway, scanning until he saw Isa a few paces away, pushing her cart toward the service elevator. "You," he called, his tone firm. "Come with me. Now." She hesitated, eyes narrowing just slightly, then nodded. They walked in silence until they reached a small break room, tucked away behind the executive suites. Ethan closed the door firmly, leaning back against it. "Explain," he said, crossing his arms, "and convince me you're not completely out of your mind for interrupting me like that." Isa set the bin down, the faint scent of cleaning solution still in the air. "I know how it sounds, but I overheard things, conversations you weren't meant to hear. That contract you're about to sign? It's been altered. You're being set up." Ethan's brows knit together. "By who?" "Sterling and Lucas Vega." Her voice trembled for just a moment before she steadied herself. "They've hidden clauses that transfer your company's debts and assets in ways that'll strip you of control. Once you sign, you're left with scraps." Now here's where I need to pause and say, if someone told you your oldest friend was trying to ruin you, would you believe them? Most people wouldn't, and Ethan was no different. "Do you have proof?" he asked, his tone caught between skepticism and a creeping dread. "I do," she replied without hesitation. Photos, screenshots. I can show you, but not here. Tonight, 7 p.m., in this room. Ethan stared at her for a long moment. She stood there, just a cleaner in the company hierarchy, yet speaking to him with more conviction than most of his executives ever had. All right, he said finally, but if this is a lie, and if you're wasting my time, you'll regret it. Issa didn't flinch. I understand, but if I stayed silent and you lost everything, I'd never forgive myself. When Ethan returned to the boardroom minutes later, all eyes were on him. Lucas leaned forward with that easy smile that had once made him seem trustworthy. Ready now? Ethan sat, glanced at the contract, then closed the folder. Actually, I think I need to review a few clauses again. Let's reconvene tomorrow. Javier's brow furrowed. Tomorrow? Ethan, the market, one day won't make a difference, Ethan said firmly. And just like that, he walked out, leaving behind a room full of stunned executives and the first ripple in what would soon become a tidal wave. That night at exactly 7 p.m., Issa was waiting in the break room with a small, worn backpack. When Ethan arrived, she took a deep breath and began laying out her evidence. Photographs of forged contract pages, audio clips of Lucas speaking with someone named Sofia Delgado, and bank records showing suspicious transfers. The first blurry photo nearly made Ethan's stomach drop. Sofia, his ex-girlfriend, the woman who had walked out of his life 2 years ago, claiming they wanted different things. She and Lucas are together now, Issa explained quietly, and they're planning to take everything from you. The audio clip confirmed it. Lucas's voice, low but smug. Once he signs, we'll have control. By the time he realizes, we'll be gone. Ethan leaned back, his jaw tight. 15 years, he muttered. I've known him 15 years. Issa slid over another photo, one of the real contract version, the one not shown to Ethan. And sure enough, instead of keeping 65% control after the merger, his stake would drop to just 15%. That's not a mistake, she said. That's fraud. Ethan's mind was spinning. Everything he thought he knew about Lucas, about the deal, about the future of his company, was suddenly under a shadow. And the person who had pulled him back from the edge wasn't a lawyer, wasn't an investor. It was a cleaning lady who had nothing to gain and everything to lose. And that, my friends, was the moment Ethan Carter decided two things. 1, he wasn't signing that contract. 2, he needed to know exactly who Issa Ramirez really was. Ethan Carter didn't sleep a single minute that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Issa Ramirez leaning in beside him, her voice barely a whisper. Don't sign. It's a trap. The photos she'd shown him, the audio clip of Lucas and Sofia plotting, it all played over and over in his mind. But one question wouldn't leave him. How could a cleaning lady know so much about contract forgeries, hidden clauses, and complex bank transfers? This wasn't something you learned pushing a mop. By sunrise, Ethan was already back in the Carter Innovations building. The hallways were still quiet, the hum of the cleaning crew fading as the day shift arrived. He went straight to human resources. Martha, the HR director, looked up in surprise. Morning, Ethan. You're here early. I need to see Issa Ramirez's file, he said casually, as though it were a routine request. Issa, from the night cleaning staff? Martha raised an eyebrow. All right, give me a second. She handed him a thin manila folder. Ethan opened it and froze. Isabella Ramirez, 29 years old. Bachelor's degree, Northwestern University. Specialization, corporate finance. Former consultant, McKinsey & Company, one of the top consulting firms in the world. It didn't make sense. Someone with that background should have been in a corner office, not pushing a cleaning cart at midnight. Martha, this is accurate? Ethan asked, almost doubting what he was reading. Absolutely. Overqualified is an understatement, she said, but she applied for janitorial work last year. We don't usually ask why someone takes a pay cut. Ethan found Issa later that morning on the 12th floor, cleaning the glass walls of a small conference room. She turned when she saw him, startled. Mr. Carter, is something wrong? You didn't tell me you graduated from Northwestern, Ethan said, stepping inside and closing the door. Or that you worked at McKinsey. Her expression didn't change, but her voice was cool. You looked into my file. Why didn't you tell me? Issa set the cleaning cloth down and crossed her arms. Because it doesn't matter here. To most people in this building, I'm just the cleaning lady. That's not an answer. She exhaled slowly. Fine. I worked at McKinsey for 2 years. I was good at it. Really good. But when it came time for promotions, there was always some excuse. My communication style. My cultural fit. She gave a bitter laugh. Translation. I didn't look like what they wanted in leadership. Not with my skin, not with my name. That's discrimination, Ethan said quietly. You can call it that. I call it reality. And when they pushed me to resign, I had bills to pay and a sister to keep alive. A sister? Maria, 22, born with a congenital heart defect. We need $200,000 for surgery. This janitorial job's health plan covers part of her treatment. I can't afford to lose it. It hit Ethan hard. Here was a woman who had everything: education, skill, corporate experience, and she was scrubbing floors to keep her sister alive. That's why you spotted the fraud in the contract, he said finally. Issa nodded. I've reviewed hundreds of corporate agreements. The second I saw the discrepancies, I knew exactly what was going on. Before Ethan could respond, the sound of leather shoes echoed in the hallway. Lucas's voice came closer. Ethan? You in there? Issa picked up her cloth again, pretending to clean. Lucas stepped in, his smile tight. Checking on the cleaning staff? That's new. Just paying more attention to details, Ethan said smoothly. Speaking of which, did you reschedule the Sterling meeting? 3 o'clock, Lucas replied. And I hope there won't be any more hesitation. Ethan forced a polite smile. Of course not. Lucas left. But the look Issa gave Ethan said everything. They were running out of time. That afternoon, danger got real. Issa was in the executive restroom when she heard voices in the hallway. She recognized them instantly, Lucas and Sofia Delgado. She's too smart for her own good, Lucas said. I checked the cameras. She was in my office the night we finalized the deal. If she told Ethan anything, Sofia began. She did, and I think he's starting to believe her. There was a pause, then Lucas's voice dropped to a cold, deliberate tone. Then I'll remove her from the equation. I'll accuse her of stealing company documents. No one will believe her over me, and if Ethan defends her, it'll make him look guilty too. Issa's pulse raced. Sofia's voice came softer but sharper. And her sister? People with weak hearts, Lucas said darkly. Sometimes accidents happen. Issa gripped the sink to keep from making a sound. She had just learned exactly how far Lucas was willing to go. Minutes later, the building intercom crackled. All employees, please report to the main auditorium for an urgent safety meeting. Issa already knew. This wasn't about safety. This was about her. The auditorium buzzed with confused chatter. Ethan sat in the front row. Lucas took the stage, holding a manila folder, his face wearing that perfect mask of authority. Yesterday, he began, confidential company documents were photographed and removed from executive offices. After a thorough investigation, we have identified the person responsible. His eyes locked on Issa. Isabella Ramirez, please come forward. Hundreds of eyes turned toward her. Her legs felt heavy, but she walked forward, head high. Security footage shows you in restricted areas, Lucas continued. And these, he held up printed photos, were found on your phone. I was protecting, she began. Protecting yourself? Lucas cut her off. Or planning to sell to a competitor? From the front row, Ethan's face was unreadable. Given your clean record, we'll terminate your employment instead of calling law enforcement, Lucas announced with false generosity. Security, escort her out. 2 guards approached. Issa looked straight at Ethan. You know I'm telling the truth. You've seen the proof. For a heartbeat, it looked like he might stand up. Speak out. Instead, he looked away. I'm sorry, Issa. The evidence is very clear. Her chest tightened. She turned toward the crowd, her voice steady but cutting. When you find out the truth, remember, you had the chance to do the right thing today, and you chose not to. The guards led her out, and Ethan Carter sat frozen, her words echoing in his head. That night he would understand. If he didn't act soon, he wouldn't just lose his company. He'd lose the only person who had risked everything to save him. Ethan Carter sat alone in his penthouse that night, staring at the Chicago skyline. Issa's last words echoed like a drumbeat in his mind. You had the chance to do the right thing today, and you chose not to. He had watched her get humiliated, escorted out of his company in front of hundreds of employees, and he'd said nothing. He told himself it was because the evidence looked damning. But deep down, he knew the real reason. Fear. Fear of Lucas. Fear of losing everything. But now that fear was turning into something else. At 3 a.m., he was back in the Carter Innovations building. The night guards looked surprised but said nothing. Ethan had the kind of authority no one questioned. In his office, he powered on his computer and pulled up every file related to the Sterling Alliance merger. Page by page, clause by clause, he searched. Until on page 47, he saw something odd. A reference to Addendum C. He'd never seen it before. It wasn't in the official board packet. It wasn't in the folder Lucas had presented. But in the encrypted executive server, there it was. Addendum C. Post-merger asset distribution. He opened it. What he read made his blood run cold. After the merger, 80% of Carter Innovations assets would transfer to Sterling International Holdings, a Cayman Islands shell company with only 2 shareholders, Lucas Vega and Sofia Delgado. Ethan sat back, his hand gripping the armrest so tightly it hurt. It wasn't just betrayal. It was theft on a scale that could destroy him. For the next 2 hours, he dug deeper. He found banking records, $23 million in merger preparation funds wired to an account under the name L. Vega. He found emails between Lucas and Sterling executives, plotting how to force Ethan out as CEO within 48 hours of signing. He found a recorded call between Lucas and Sofia, laughing about how predictable Ethan was. The final straw was hearing Sofia's voice say, "David was a good boyfriend, but too small for my dreams. With you, Lucas, I can have everything I've ever wanted." That was it. Ethan closed the laptop, hands trembling. Not from fear this time, but from rage. Issa had been right about everything, and now he had proof. By dawn, he knew 2 things. 1. Lucas and Sofia needed to be taken down. 2. He had to find Issa and fix the mistake of letting her take the fall. But when he called HR to get her contact information, the receptionist hesitated. "Mr. Carter, she didn't leave a forwarding address. All we have is her original application." It was enough. Within the hour, Ethan was driving south, deep into Pilsen, a neighborhood far from his world of glass towers and private boardrooms. The streets were lined with small shops, cracked sidewalks, kids riding bikes between old brick buildings. He parked outside a faded 3-story apartment block, apartment 2B. When Issa opened the door, she looked different, tired, wary. There was a safety chain in place, and her eyes were red like she hadn't slept. "What do you want?" she asked flatly. "I found the proof," Ethan said. "Everything. The fake contract, the transfers, the shell company. You were right." She gave a bitter laugh. "You just figured that out now? After you stood there and let Lucas drag my name through the mud?" "I was wrong," Ethan admitted, voice low. "And I'm here to make it right." Before Issa could answer, a voice from inside called, "Issa? Who is it?" She hesitated, then unlatched the chain. "It's my sister, Maria," she said quietly. Maria appeared in the doorway, young, pale, moving slowly. She smiled faintly at Ethan. "You must be my sister's boss." "Former boss," Issa corrected quickly. Maria didn't seem to notice the tension. "Issa talks about you. She says you're not like other bosses." Ethan's chest tightened. If only that were true. Once Maria went back to rest, Ethan sat on the edge of Issa's worn couch. "Why didn't you tell me how sick she was?" "You think it would have changed anything?" Issa said, arms crossed. "I still would have been the cleaning lady to you, and Lucas still would have destroyed me." Ethan shook his head. "Number you were never just anything, and I'm going to clear your name. I'll make sure your sister gets the surgery." "I don't need your charity." "It's not charity," he said firmly. "It's responsibility. I let you get hurt. I stood by. That ends now. But before Ethan could say more, Issa's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, and her face went pale. It was a message from an unknown number. Tell your new friend to sign the contract today, or Maria's next hospital visit will be her last. Ethan felt the air leave his lungs. Lucas had just made his move, and now Ethan knew. The only way to save Issa and her sister was to take Lucas Vega down before he could strike again. The message on Issa's phone hung in the air like a knife. Ethan stared at it, jaw tight, pulse pounding. He had been betrayed in business before, but never like this, and never with someone's life on the line. They know we're working together, Issa said quietly, her voice steady but her eyes betraying fear. Lucas won't hesitate. If he thinks I'm a threat, he won't touch you, Ethan cut in, his tone sharper than he intended. Not while I'm still breathing. For a long moment, they just looked at each other. Two people from completely different worlds, now bound by one shared mission: bring Lucas Vega and Sofia Delgado down, once and for all. They spent the rest of the day in Ethan's penthouse, working like two prosecutors preparing for the trial of the century. Issa had recordings, photos, and copies of altered contracts hidden in multiple places. Ethan had the official boardroom booking for the next day and full control of the company's internal presentation system. The plan was simple but dangerous. 1. Call a final merger review meeting with the board and Sterling's representatives. 2. Present Lucas's and Sophia's forged documents alongside the real versions. 3. Play the recordings for the entire room. 4th, hand everything to the police, who would be waiting outside. If this works, Ethan said, leaning over the table as they laid out the evidence, they won't just lose the company, they'll lose their freedom. Issa looked at him, eyes serious. And if it doesn't work? Ethan didn't hesitate. Then I lose everything. But I'd rather lose it all doing the right thing than live another day knowing I stood by while they destroyed someone like you. For the first time since this started, Issa smiled. All right, Carter, let's finish this. The next afternoon, the boardroom was packed. Executives whispered to one another, curious why the meeting had been rescheduled at the last minute. Lucas sat at the far end of the table, looking confident, Sophia beside him in a white designer suit, her lips curved in a mocking half-smile. Ethan entered with Issa at his side. Murmurs rippled through the room. Some board members still remembered the way she'd been fired. Lucas's voice was a low growl. What is she doing here? Ethan ignored him. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, his voice carrying over the chatter. Before we finalize any merger, there are a few details we need to address. He nodded toward Issa, who walked to the projector and pulled up the first slide. This, she said, pointing to the screen, is the version of the Sterling Alliance contract you were all shown. The terms looked harmless. Ethan retaining 65% control post-merger. She clicked to the next slide. And this is the version Lucas Vega and Sofia Delgado intended to file after Ethan signed. The figures changed. 15% control for Ethan, with the rest transferred to Sterling International Holdings. The room erupted in shocked murmurs. Lucas was on his feet. This is outrageous. You're making this up. Issa's voice was steady. Then maybe you'd prefer the audio. She pressed play. Lucas's voice filled the room. Once he signs, we'll have control. By the time he realizes, we'll be gone. Sophia's laugh followed. David was a good boyfriend, but too small for my dreams. With you, I can have everything I've ever wanted. The room went dead silent. Then came the bank records. $23 million transferred from Carter Innovations accounts to Lucas's personal account. Then the surveillance photos, and finally the recording of Lucas threatening Issa and Maria. By the time it ended, Lucas's face was pale and sweaty. Sophia's hands were trembling, her nails digging into the folder in front of her. Ethan turned to them, his voice like ice. 15 years of friendship, Lucas, and this is who you really are. Lucas opened his mouth, but another voice cut in from the back. Lucas Vega, Sofia Delgado, you're under arrest for corporate fraud, embezzlement, and extortion. Two Chicago PD detectives stepped into the room, followed by uniformed officers. The moment the handcuffs clicked, the boardroom burst into applause. Outside, as the police cars pulled away, Issa stood beside Ethan. The autumn wind carried the faint sound of sirens fading into the distance. "You did it," she said softly. "No," Ethan replied, turning to look at her. "We did it. And you saved me long before I could save myself." Issa's eyes softened. "So, what now?" Ethan smiled, something genuine and unguarded. "Now I'd like to offer you a real job. Vice President of Operations. Not because you deserve a second chance. Because you're better than anyone I've ever worked with." Issa laughed in disbelief. "From cleaning floors to running part of the company?" "From saving my life to running part of the company," Ethan corrected. 6 months later, Carter Innovations had grown faster than anyone predicted. Issa had streamlined operations, negotiated new contracts, and earned the respect of every employee. Maria had her surgery and was now walking the company halls, healthy and smiling, visiting her sister's corner office. On a Friday evening, Ethan walked into Issa's office holding a small bouquet. "Dinner?" he asked. She looked up from her laptop, smiling. "Only if you're buying." As they walked out together, Ethan thought about that moment months ago. A whisper that had stopped his pen mid-signature. The betrayal had been brutal. The fight to expose it had been dangerous. But standing next to Issa now, he realized something. Losing everything isn't the worst thing that can happen to you. The worst thing is not listening to the person brave enough to tell you the truth. And because he finally had, he'd gained far more than a company. That's how a cleaning lady's whisper didn't just save a billionaire's empire. It gave him back his integrity, his courage, and maybe even his heart.